Today we will begin with the topic, the cross-section between art activation, spatial and social design.
Now, without further ado, please welcome our speaker of the session, Ms. Susan Du, Director of BIG China. Susan, please.
Okay, after a lunch break, everyone's probably in food coma, so wake up, okay? I'm also gonna wake up. Exactly, I do it a few times every day. Okay, so I'm very glad to be invited here and to be with all of you guys, and thank you also for coming to talk about something that's very interesting to me, like this interface always like between these different art, social, spatial, and how it reflects in the city, and also of course with the architecture, as I'm an architect. So first I'm just going to talk a little bit about this is BIG's footprint right now. So as you can see that we're relatively global nowadays. We started in Copenhagen, and then we grew into a very big presence in New York, covering North America, and that's where I used to work. And then in 2021, I came to China and opened our China office in Shenzhen, and now the headquarters of China is also in Shanghai. So, how do I make this work? Am I clicking the right thing? Oh, okay. These are our global offices right now across the globe, and there's our relatively new Shanghai office that I just moved from Shenzhen to Shanghai last year. Is there another clicker? Okay. Let's try again. If it doesn't work, we'll find some other ways. But you also jump through another slide at a header. It's basically showing you guys that I think what we're doing right now across the globe shares one common ground, is that we always want to integrate public participation, public spaces into our architecture, whether if it's a residential, if it's an office tower, it's a factory, hotel, museums, everything that's a different typology all shares similarities in this public grounds and also diversity. And then in China, since 2021, we've now been doing also a very diverse portfolio from the one that's going to open in a few months, the Suzhou Art Museum, and also we're designing a history museum, towers, even retail, headquarters, hotels, and also in Shanghai, urban renewal master plan. So all of these projects that whenever we're doing them, I'm actually thinking my experience in designing them is actually beyond just an object, architecture as an object, but rather we're actually designing the urban tissues that is fostering more human and people connectivity, and also this civic imagination. So this first project that I'm going to show you guys today is an urban renewal project in Copenhagen that we did around almost, I would say 13, 12 years ago. And this project is situated in somewhat kind of north of Copenhagen. Used to be a relatively new area, and also it's notoriously known as the most criminal rate area in Copenhagen, or actually in the whole country of Denmark. So the City Hall of Copenhagen, they were thinking about if they can do a continuous large park span this whole neighborhood and really change the condition and the situation of this neighborhood, and then making people feeling more safer living around this area. So the first thing that we did when we walked through the neighborhood is that we actually found one of the most, I would say, interesting or the most unique character is that this is the most diverse area in Copenhagen. the whole area consists of maybe 90% of immigrants living here, and it has around 60 different nationalities. So we can actually think about when newcomers come to a different city or a country, right? Their priorities are more about the immediate needs, their housing, their jobs, or finding a permit. So there's a lack of public participation in this whole area. That's why when we first thought about how do we create a urban space and a renewal project to help this area, we were thinking about we want to use a media that could allow and also invite all the residents to participate. So that's why we divided this park into 3 different zones and characterized by 3 different colors. We have the red square, the black market, and then the green linear park. And then within this park, we're actually going to ask all of these different nationalities to provide an object, an installation from their own culture, their different nationalities, so that the people feel more related to, and then they're more willing to use this park instead of building something that just hangs out there and nobody goes, especially at this high criminal rate neighborhood. So that's why we started doing all these different manuals for one object from a different country, a different culture, and then really look into what materials are going to be used, the colors, and then how do we install them. And then we started to pile up a manual for one object from each country. And then as you can see that you can probably recognize some of your own identity in some of these objects. And then when we were doing this, the first image that I see here is the red square. So you start to see in this sort of dark area of Copenhagen, we drew the colors from the original buildings nearby and applied on the whole ground floor and also some of the facade of the architecture so that it reads as a continuous surface. And then all of a sudden, in the dark city, there is something that's pop, that's bright, that makes people feel more vibrant, and especially also people are going to think it's safer. So this attracted a lot of residents nearby, but also attracted a lot of visitors. And this made this little area to start have its own identity. And then how do we make that further is by really going to different individuals and asking them to provide this one object that is an everyday object. We don't want something glamorous. We don't want something that's super expensive. We want something that they feel like they have access to every day in their own culture, in their own nation. So we have the Chinese neon lights over here. We also have the Spanish bowl with an American donut sign. It's actually very interesting. When we first built this donut sign, that was one of the first batch of the installations, people did not know that this is just an installation. So random people would come here and look for a donut store. And then I'm sorry, nobody told them there's no donut store. So that was a pity. And then we start to also, of course, putting a lot of the seating areas so that people can actually hang out. This is one of the very, you see them everywhere in Iraq. They're swinging chairs. We have probably, I don't know, Mika would have recognized this from Finland. It's a little bit close to you. The rainbow bicycle rack. And of course, it's a very violent area. So instead of letting people punch each other on the street, we recommend them go on to this little stage from Thailand and then do this violent thing more as a sports. And then it's funny that you start to see other nationalities coming here and then start practicing. You know, there's always this competitiveness in this area. And then this, you guys probably will see them everywhere in India as well in the playground. So it's quite interesting that all of these installations and objects, they actually embody the whole concept of this project. It's really about bringing these everyday objects from all of the nation and then put it here to represent and also to illustrate the multicultural identity in this area. And then if we move further down, we'll see this is called the black market. Why it's called black market? It used to be the biggest drug dealing area in Copenhagen. And then we still kept it black because we want to say that in urban design, when we're doing it, instead of repressing something that we normally find like unacceptable or unpleasant in the past, we actually reveal it. And then we make this or slowly turn it into something that could be integrated and make it a little bit nicer. And that's why everything you see here is black and white. And then this is one of the very popular installation in the park. It's a Moroccan swimming pool. Parents love to come here and they can sit by the pool and then the kids can jump in there and play with themselves for hours. So you guys, if you have kids, you probably know how much pool can do to a kid. This is from Japan, the octopus. They're everywhere as well in Japan playgrounds. A lot of them are pink or red, and of course here we paint it to black. And then you start to see also people trying to color code it a little bit with their own clothing. This is actually one of my favorite. It started with, when we started to do this process, it was very hard. No one wants to participate. We do workshops, no one shows up, unlike you guys. So we had to form groups of people to knock on people's door. And then we met this guy who was very, he's not interested in the beginning, but luckily like one of the person from our group knew him. So he started to talk about his own story, and he talks about his uncle from back home, gave him money to come to Copenhagen to study, and his uncle is a dentist. So he's like, does this count? It's not really like a national identity, but it's my story, and we loved it. So there's a lot of these like very intimate, personal experience. If you're from the UK, you recognize this right away. Chinese palm trees growing in this cold Nordic city. And then if you go to Germany, you see these also everywhere. And I love how they can be used very differently by the people living here or around in the similar neighborhoods. And then we also have a lot of different seatings with the trees, and you can see it changing from season to season. So I think I want to show this project today because you can kind of start to see how an object, how an installation, such at a small scale, can really affect people's relationship with the public spaces. And this is the last part, which is the linear green park. And this is basically where all the public sports are from this neighborhood, and we relocated them into this park. Especially in a multi-nationality neighborhood. Like Bauman once said, probably sports is one of the very few institutions that everyone can agree on a law, even though you're from different culture, you speak different languages. So a lot of the younger kids in this neighborhood and also from other neighborhoods and schools nearby would come here and then play the sports together, use the space, but also just to know each other more. And then besides all these objects, you also see a more holistic planning when we did this park, that we integrated a bike lane that goes through the whole park and also connected with the other rest of the park lanes in other neighborhoods. So this place not only becomes a destination, a little local park, but it also becomes like this kind of transit hub that a lot of people bike through it. And then now you look at this. It's one of the most popular and recognized public space in Copenhagen. But 15 years ago, it was actually one of the highest crime rate area in Copenhagen. So I think this project is really this experiment of how we merge urban renewal with cultural heritage and also art activation to improve the public space while really preserving and celebrating the different nationalities and culture. And then the second project is in Copenhagen. I'm going to run a little bit faster. It's also a very interesting urban renewal project in the second biggest city, Aarhus, in Copenhagen, in Denmark. As you can see, nothing's here. It used to be. This is almost like 20 years ago. And then there's only that one little building, sad building, and nobody want to come here. They don't want to move here, even though the city is really trying to make this harbor a new thing. And then we came in here, we did a master plan, and then 5 different phases of architecture to really activate and make this neighborhood lively. And now it's one of the most welcoming and also chic hotspot for younger people to live in. And you can see along this coast, we're still doing our last phase of hotel, but everything else is already built and lived by a lot of the people here. However, I'm not going to go into these architecture today, but I want to talk about when we started to do the master plan, how did we engage the public and how do we turn something that no one wanted to come into a very public engaged space? So traditionally, when you do waterfront development, most of the developers or the city, they want to do this very linear build as close as to the water as possible sort of concept because they want to maximize the volume of their developments when they're close to the water. However, when we started talking to the city, we're like, there's no one here. Like whatever developments that you do, if you don't engage the public, if you don't give back to the people, they're not going to want them to come. So what we wanted to do is to create this dynamic waterfront experience and give it to the public spaces instead of giving it to private developments. So the first phase that we actually did in this project is not those buildings that's behind it. It's actually a harbor bath. So we thought the water is clean. We have this natural resources, but we don't have people. But then where do people go swim? They have to drive 30 minutes away. So why don't we create something that can allow the people to come here despite where they live and despite if this area has it's developed or not, but at least we have this facility that everyone can use. So as you can the photos speak for itself. Once this was built, an empty, abandoned pier all of a sudden become this touristic place. And then especially, Copenhagen, in Denmark, people are very close to water. And they love water sports. They like diving into the pool. So we really turned this sort of cultural habit into something that can attract people to come here. And then a very interesting thing that you see on this photo is over here. Just remember this row of construction little cabins. You'll see what they turn into later. But I'm going to come to this little part first. So the second phase, we did this residential. And then we proposed to do, instead of building this close to the water line, we set this back. And then we built these little beach huts at the front. And then the people who are buying these beach huts, they're actually the owners of the residential behind these beach huts. When you buy these beach huts, there's one requirement is that you have to do 10 public events every year. So that people start to make these into Airbnb, little cafes, and then the people who's living here, it becomes part of the public sort of curation team. And then they actually devote their time to make this place a better place for everyone and also themselves. And then what happened, very interesting. Remember, you guys just saw that row of construction little cabins. And then because they linger here long enough, and then people got used to some of those construction little stalls. Sometimes they sell a hot dog, sometimes they sell a very bad coffee, but they got used to that. So we're like, okay, why don't we just modify that a little bit and then turn them into something that's a bit more permanent. and then really allow people to still have this waterfront retail experience. And then you can see they're all designed holistically, but each little huts actually have its own identity. Some of them used a very traditional Danish construction methods and materials, and some of them are glass little greenhouses, and then some of them are even using this very traditional type of starch that can be very sturdy during the winter. And then once we had all of these identities, people start to come here, and then they wanted to rent a little shop. Some of them are actually maybe students over here, and some are residents living in maybe 20 minutes away. But they found this very interesting retail experience, and then they come here and then start their little own business. And then after a while, this is maybe we started 15 years ago from the master plan, and this is around like 3-4 years ago when we finally turned the construction little huts into permanent retail stores. You can see like how many people are actually using these little simple infrastructures. They're not expensive. They're not like crazily designed architecture. But they're just these little things that are ran by the city, but also by the people living here, and then made this accessible public space. And then it brought more people, and then allowed the whole area to develop further. Okay, and then the last project I want to talk about today is a little bit different from the first two. The first two was more a larger urban scale, and this is actually a one architecture building. And why I want to talk about this one, this is probably our one of the work that I would call a program alchemy. We call it at BIG. What does it mean is that we try to integrate and put all the urban tissues that I just talked about, all these different layers, into one architecture building, and then trying to achieve all of that just through one building. So this project is actually urban, it's in the city, it's in the center of the Copenhagen city, and it's a waste to energy plant. And it's a real one. Like it's actually burning all the waste, and then it's supplying almost 40% of Copenhagen's electricity. And then what's also interesting is, I don't know how much you guys know about Copenhagen, it's very, very flat. So this energy plant is actually the tallest building in our whole city. So when we were designing it, we're thinking there's so many of these like gray areas that people don't want to go to, but they're actually very useful. They're infrastructures. But can we do it to another degree that can also allow public participation, can also be more than just an infrastructure, but also have more positive impact on the environment? So there we go. We turn it into a mountain. And because of this is the cleanest energy waste planet in the world, so everything that comes out from that chimney is 100% clean. And also this is the tallest building in Copenhagen. So we use that opportunity to turn into this social infrastructure. So on the outside, you have the tallest man-made climbing wall. And actually, if you go there, you see a lot of people from different parts of the world come here to challenge this tallest rock climbing place. It's quite crazy. I cannot do this, but if you're into this, you're welcome to go and really try it out. I've heard great experience about this. And inside of this, it is still a real factory. So you go in there, you can see all the engineering about how we turn trash into electricity. And then you can also take an elevator back there to go all the way up to the tip of this mountain. And then because of the height, because of its cleanness, we made the first mountain in Copenhagen because there's none. And then people can actually come here in the summer. They practice like skiing on the grass. And then we did a lot of specializing material with an Italian vendor to make sure that people actually can feel it as a grass, that they don't get stuck. Because at first when we're doing it, like after 2 minutes, people get stuck and then they roll over. So what this did is that you think about the younger generation of Danish kids. They actually don't realize that on the top of the building, you cannot ski. They're born with this idea that infrastructure or the top of the building, it should not be abandoned. It's something that they can enjoy, that they can actually learn skiing since they're little kids. And of course, if you're not into extreme sports, then you can actually climb this building as if it were a real mountain. And we planted more than 80 different local species to this mountain. So if there is one, in Copenhagen, the mountain is probably going to look like this. And then after a year, we went back because of the wind, because of the bees. The species actually grow from 80 to 200. So it really become into this ecosystem that allow not just people, but also animals, plants to be integrated into this building system. And then once you come to the top, you can have event spaces over here. You can see the most beautiful, because it's the tallest, view of the whole city. And I just love how this building looks at different seasons, at different moments. And then now this is like the 2 most famous landmark in Copenhagen, with this Little Mermaid in the front from 100 years ago, and this new infrastructure that's giving people electricity, but at the same time to allow our society, our people, our plants to all gather together and create something new. Okay, thank you. I think this is it.
Thank you, Susan. Please stay with us on stage for our next panel, where Blow Design meets social activation, explore how art and space can catalyze real-world change. First, please welcome back on stage our moderator, Professor Mo. Professor Mo, please. Joining us on the panel, we have Mr. Chang Kem Phai, lecturer of the Hong Kong Polytechnic University School of Design. Please welcome. Next, we have Mr. Patty Ng, Senior Manager of Jockey Club Design Institute for Social Innovation. Please welcome everyone on stage again. And over to you, Professor Mo.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Susan, for the very interesting and also delightful presentation. I happen to have a chance to visit at least 2 of the projects. I probably missed the middle one. This is actually quite new, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it gives me a wonderful perspective to understand how you guys think about architecture, think about design, and what can it do to the city itself. So when I reflect on this very project, I think the project itself tells us that it takes actually quite a lot of positivity, a lot of humor, a lot of creativity to turn something around, or even the most dangerous place, even the most mundane infrastructure, and even the most challenging site that is with nothing, right? Under the pressure of you're also from mainland China, and also we are part of the mainland China's, what Xichao mentioned, Hong Kong as one of the Chinese city, right? So we are under a lot of pressure in terms of time and economic pressure, financial stuff, right? So can you share with us what is your view in terms of time that we need to commit, in terms of resources that we need to commit in order to learn or adapt or something that you just share in this particular context?
Wow. That's a hugely complex question. You're talking about Hong Kong City, or just
Greater Bay Area?
Yeah, why I say it's complex, because I always think that architecture consists of so many different aspects, right? Like that is also why when we go to school, the first 2 years has nothing to do with architecture. It's all about history, philosophy, psychology. So that is why because I grew up in the States, and then in the past 4 years, I've been living in China. So I see this huge difference, and also, of course, I go to Denmark a lot for work. So I always say that I feel like there's 3 different phases of the cities or the developments in China, and then the US, and then Europe. And of course, that all comes with the history and also the development timeline, right, of the whole civilization. China, obviously, at least in the past decades, are developed the latest, but also crazily fast in the past 2 decades. And then Europe had a lot of developments already, and I always think US is kind of in the middle. So that is why I often find, let's say, sustainability, cultural heritage, and also historical preservation. I think they're more well thought in Europe, and then a little bit less thought in the US, and then a little bit less thought in China. And that is why, to me, I think this is it's very normal to me, because I think everything is interconnected. So it comes to when you say like time, how does it work in different places? I think it just needs time. Like, for example, China, like nowadays, a lot of people at my office always questioning me about how we're doing projects that are maybe not to the sustainability standard in Copenhagen. And I'm telling them, well, wait for 40 more years and it's gonna get there. And not saying that we should not do more higher standard sustainability in China, but every city has its own pace at solving different things. If you try to rush it, if you try to kind of course correct it, maybe it just doesn't work because everything's interconnected together. So that's why you see the examples that I just showed in Europe. I think they're at a point that a lot of stuff, I think Mika also talked about this, right? A lot of neighborhoods, they're actually facing aging issues, or overdeveloped, or everyone is, sometimes I say they're happy enough that they don't have too many crises anymore. And then that comes a new crisis. So about the race, about sustainability, all of these issues are addressed more. And then in China, I think right now we're moving from an age where we finished fast, rapid urbanization, and we're moving into a more human-centric. I think especially human-centric, because a lot of the cities in the past 2 years, 2 decades, they're just not really for human. They're for cars. They're for mega developments. So now we're moving over there, and then we're also moving into more, I think, sustainability, and also more cultural heritage in terms of allowing our own roots to be present in a project, but at the same time to be international. Yeah, so it's a very complex question. So I chose my sort of my interest in this question. I'll pass it to you guys.
So what do you guys think? So I think I think what Susan mentioned is actually very interesting. Like in mainland China, now we are actually past the phase of rapid urbanization, as what you mentioned, and we are talking about the refinement of our urban tissue, using your word, right? And to fine-tune the infrastructure so that it becomes more human-centric. But what is the story of Hong Kong? Or is there any response? Because the two of Paddy as well as Ganfei, you have a lot of ground experience, right? So how do you see this in a bigger context of like, we are part of mainland China, and are we doing this?
Me first. I'm very curious about the cases you shown. The small lodge, along the promenade side, right? That's about the scheme about for the individuals to to own it as an ownership scheme, right? But there's a commitment about the 20 times a year commit to hold something to the public, right? The picture is very short to me because you know the small notch even, you know, there's a low rise. I can see the fancy building behind the small notch even, right? So it seems like it's not possible in Hong Kong context, right? You know the promenade, the seaside views and the land values should be the most expensive one. But how can it make happen? Because, you know, it's all about the engagement. How the owners behind the larger, bigger buildings is permitted the small notches can be exist in front of them. That's a very significant lesson we are going to learn from your experience, actually. So for us, the context is because, you know, after Second World War, we are in the Hong Kong context, we are facing another round of urban regenerations. And, you know, the economic downturns right now in Hong Kong, and, you know, there are many shop houses is vacant right now. And we just, on the stage, we just talk very much about how can we re-vibrant the utilization of the space, especially the space which is where it's very significant, and how can we have to drive some possibility to have a common interest, not only the ownership of the household, but also the public. And just like take Tai Kok Tsui as a context, you know, actually Tai Kok Tsui, the demographic is quite young. It's not only retiring ages altogether, but, you know, there's adjoining Mong Kok area, and that's why they are quite vibrant and very close to the central area of Kowloon. And that's why we always think about how can we strike a balance between the residential vibrancy and the economic vibrancy. So seems like there's a quite interesting cases that can be compared and give some insight more to us to think about further.
Susan, want to respond?
Yeah. Do you have any inspiring aspiration to us?
No, I think the projects that I showed, of course, I think those are some of the very atypical and also interesting examples. And then oftentimes I also talk with clients or governments in China about maybe bringing some of those ideas, not all of them, let's say like maybe the beach huts or maybe the harbor bath. And now I see a lot of people are interested. For example, we're working with West Bond from Shanghai, and then when I show them this, the harbor bath, they're saying, like, why can't we have one in West Bond by the water? I'm like, you can. So we actually really talked about it. And of course, policies is always a very difficult thing. But then I really appreciate now more and more people are recognizing the thought of public participation and also this community idea. So I don't know Hong Kong well enough to understand if there's, but I have the sense of Hong Kong has more public participation than China, at least from outsider view. Yeah, I don't know if that's true.
Maybe Gongfei can add on to that.
Yeah. I think the work is very impressive. I mean, from the perspective of Hong Kong citizen, but sometimes when we look at, I just want to remind some of our audience that sometimes when we look at this really, really great work, it's easy to just look at all these great work from a very shallow point of view, like the building is really spectacular, the planning is really good. In fact, I can see that during all these process of development, there are a lot of subtleties that we might miss. Not just the appearance, but also all the principles that lying behind all these words. like because we are doing social design, we also often talk about scale, how to work across different scales. Of course, master planning is a large scale, but large scale doesn't just mean that it's a large work, right? It's a huge work. The larger the better, right? Not just that simple. We can see that it's a large scale work because it works with many things. So it's not just bigness, but also the multiplicity of dimension. Like you see, all these very impressive words actually touch on the social life of people, their cultural way of cultural lifestyle. In the past, we often, in the more conventional point of view of design, sometimes you often say that the design of space will shape people's behavior. But actually, it's much more than that. It is not just shaping people's behavior, but actually also enable people to create more, to participate more. So in that sense, I think it's really, really interesting that we are not just learning from the building or planning structure, but also learning from this tactic, this principle behind all this work. Just like what Patty said, I also have some question that because in Hong Kong, even though what Susan said that maybe in Hong Kong we have more public participation, but still we are facing a lot of difficulties when we not just public participation, but all sorts of design for the public good are. Because our condition, as you say, is very much different from Copenhagen, also very different from the States, I believe. So, and also as Patty say, we are undergoing the next wave of urban redevelopment. Some people view it very negatively because they fear a lot of this like gentrification, or a disruption of the existing communities. So how do you, from your experience in Chinese city, and also in Hong Kong, how do you view this future of if we really want to regenerate the urban vibrancy, we want to keep the community, we want to enable people to participate, how would it different? How would it be different in Hong Kong if we want to follow all these good examples from Copenhagen or any other project from BIG?
I think there's, I lived in New York for more than 10 years. And then, of course, New York is one of those cities that are going through waves of urban regeneration. And then actually, my place is in Brooklyn, and also our office is in Brooklyn as well. Of course, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Brooklyn. So when we were younger, Brooklyn is like a no-go place, right? Like your parents are like, no, like that's where you get shoot. And now, Dumbo is where our office is. Probably Bjarke is the only person who can afford to live there. And the downtown Brooklyn has also gone outrageous, and also Williamsburg, probably you guys know. So this gentrification is a huge problem or topic in New York when it comes to urban regeneration. And then, of course, there's always like pros and cons. Like when you don't do developments, right? This place just stay as is, and then there's no improvements. But whenever you make something good, and then you drive a lot of the local people out as the prices go up. So it's a very difficult, ongoing topic. But there are strategies right now, at least, that we really try to, that we tested and try to apply. First is definitely social housing. And I'm also really glad to see this in China right now as well. I think there's like this very new concept of rethink about this social housing product. Because in the US now, especially in New York, a lot of the projects that we did, like the triangular residential that some of you might know, and a lot of our new projects are maybe a third or a quarter that's social housing. And then the rest of them are actually quite expensive rental apartments. And then in the past, it's very hard to imagine such a thing. But now it's becoming more and more acceptable. And also we integrate it so much better that these two things can actually exist at the same place. And this really allows more local people, like more people to be able to stay there instead of getting driven out. And I think in China now there's also this, I don't know about in Hong Kong, but I've really noticed in China, residential developments now, you either do ultra luxury or you do social housing. Like it's a problem now for developers that they cannot just do a good, normal, expensive apartments because no one's gonna buy them. So we start to see these new interesting phenomenon, and I still believe in developments of areas that need improvements, because otherwise it's gonna just no one's gonna get any good from it. But what strategies we put in, and also how do we consciously think about to preserve the localness, to preserve the different social and economic levels, right? And also the different cultural heritage is very important in this urban regeneration.
I think it's not an easy task, or in all contexts, right? Or particularly in your sharing, there's one part about participation, right? So I think BIG has used quite a wide spectrum of participation method. Let's put it like this. So one of the things that I think there's a shared ground among all contexts is about storytelling. How to stage the voice of the community members effectively, especially in the super green projects, right? So can you share a little bit more, and also to see how Hong Kong actually is doing, or would there be any like learning, or would there be any things that is super different of the two contexts?
So this is also another double-edged sword sort of story, I think, because I don't know as much how European or Copenhagen. I know a few projects, but I of course I do most of my projects in the States, so I understand the public participation there way more, and it sometimes can go very extreme. And sometimes I'm like, can we have some dictatorship there? So instead of like 100 people trying to voice all of their opinion 100 times a year, I would really appreciate one voice. But what I'm saying is I think sometimes it's about a system, but sometimes it's also about getting not used to, but it's hard, but then you have to. So I think it's a mindset sort of process as well. So in like the Copenhagen one is actually relatively not easy, but a little bit easier because there's no requirement that the people living around there need to approve our design. It's more of us actively seeking for their opinions. Whereas for the big U projects that we're doing in New York, which is the whole water line, we're trying to do a flood protection infrastructure that requires a lot of public sign-offs. And then the process is very tedious. However, what I think we're good at is that we make something that's easy for people to understand and also visually positive to them. So that is probably also why we won a lot of public engagement competitions, because we really make a story that allow them to see a brighter future, right? Maybe these 2 years you're gonna have a very noisy construction timeline, but after 2 years, you and your kids, your families are gonna enjoy all of these benefits and positive effects we bring on. So I think this is one of the strategy. But then the second one is really just the mindset. You just have to know that this is needed, even though it's hard. And then you just have to kind of power through. And then you also have to accept that there are going to be a large group of people who are never going to be happy and satisfied with anything you do. You're moving a tree from their backyard and they hate you forever. You fix a road for them and then they also hate you forever. So, but that's okay. At least you understand the needs, and then you then decide what you think is better for like maybe the longer timeline and the majority of the people living around.
Let's have a response from Hong Kong, and then I guess
Yeah. I just one point about the participations. Just like taking my experience in Tai Kok Tsui, because I remember, at least I have to say thanks Ian. Ian gave me a chance to give part of the proposal of this project at the very, very beginning. I in charge in the social aspect, right? And that's why I have a chance to kick a very early study about the community profile for the Tai Kok Tsui. And I set a very tiny target for the Tai Kok Tsui very at the beginning. I have this established IG, Instagram account to have 200 followers in 2 weeks. And that's it. It's success. It's success to do so. And at the very in the first year of the project, because the Tai Kok Tsui project is taking 3 years project, right? At the very beginning, I emphasized to approach the shop operator within the Tai Kok Tsui, because there's a very key terms about the engagement, the ownership. How can we establish the ownership in the participation throughout the programs? And that's why, as a small shop operator, that's the key and very significant social role within the community to touch base between the peoples within Tai Kok Tsui. No matter they are residents or just a mobile population working in Tai Kok Tsui at the daytimes. And so that's the key. That what was the benchmark we should be achieved to proceed the engagement process, and what expectation we are going to move forward. Because just like I'm always encouraged. Actually, I want to encourage you. The first 3 years is just the first phases of doing the demonstration of the urban regenerations in Tai Kok Tsui. You know, everyone know Tai Kok Tsui is a very massive, big area under the urban redevelopment. But that is just the first phases. When we gathered and built enough trust with the stakeholders in various levels, how can we catch and don't just lose from the project limitations, and how can we move forward? Although maybe tomorrow is the project closing ceremony already, and every of us, although we are the artists, teachers, and the urban researchers, have to step down from the projects. But how can we continue the trust building with the participation, and then drive for a better picture and possibility to the regeneration for the next couple of decades? Yeah.
I think we had time's up, but just to sort of summarize, I think urban regeneration, there's pros and cons, right? And also one critical thing is that it takes time, we cannot rush through, nothing can be rushed through. And but at the end of the day, probably we cannot come to a point that absolute consensus could be built, but still we need to ensure the kind of beautiful picture could be sort of done on the ground. So I think thank you for all the thank you Gunther, thank you Paddy, and thank you Susan. Thank you.
Thank you all our speakers for the enlightening discussion between art activation, spatial and social design. Please be seated.